Hi, hope you like and follow so you can get notified of new episodes. And now it's time to
Tell me an old captain story.
Episode 12 Old Captain and Eel of the Moon. One quiet, warm summer night aboard his ship, Old Captain looked at himself in the mirror. The hour was little more than a whisper. The aging cavalier looked at himself and frowned at his belly. He ran a finger through his long mustache and beard. They were getting grayer by the day. Lately, he'd found himself feeling a little sour and sad about things, but when he looked at his life, he could not figure out why. He had the best friends a man could want, a family of friends, but still, there were times when he felt unbearably alone. As he turned away from the mirror, a reflection of moonlight caught his eye. He went out onto the deck of the ship. It was so quiet aboard the Whimsy Wayfarer since he dismissed the crew earlier that day to be by himself. The ship was anchored not far from one of the crew's favorite islands, where they would carouse all night with the locals they had come to know over the years. He could just hear the ruckus of merriment and knew they would have stories in the morning. Now alone, which he both preferred and regretted, Old Captain watched the moonlight dance on the ocean waves. He enjoyed the sounds of water lapping against the Whimsy Wayfarer. The ship's hull groaned and creaked with every ebb and sigh of the sea. The old cavalier scratched his mustache as he looked up at the night sky. High above, a few clouds lingered, and beyond them, something was happening to the moon. He squinted to see, even raising on his tiptoes as if it would help. "What is that?" he said aloud. Is that a tail?" There appeared to be a long, white protrusion coming from the moon. The phenomenon then started to move, slowly and ponderously, as if the moon itself were unraveling. He looked around as if anyone else might be seeing what he was seeing. He rubbed his eyes and shook his head, then looked up again. The tail was longer now, and then even longer still. The moon was no longer a moon, but something more, like a great thread of light uncoiling before his eyes, while the stars just stood by and did nothing. Old Captain watched in awe as what was the moon he'd known all his years, had looked up to, and even whispered philosophical musings to late at night, and which had guided him in one way or another throughout his life, had become a giant, serpentine thing of moonlight making its way toward the earth. The strange ribbon of moonlight drew closer and closer. It wasn't just coming to earth, it was coming towards him. I must be dreaming. He tried pinching himself, then slapped his own cheek, a bit harder than he'd intended. Ow! He was, in fact, awake. The thing of moonlight started out small, because it was so far away. Then it appeared enormous as it approached the earth. Now it seemed to be shrinking somewhat, and then, without so much as a splash, it slipped into the ocean silently and disappeared on the horizon. Huh! Old Captain shook his head. A moment later, a line of bright moonlight wound its way gracefully toward the ship, and there before Old Captain was the most beautiful creature. It was beneath the surface of the water. What he could see was the length of at least two blue whales swimming nose to tail, and was thicker towards the head, which itself was almost as big as Old Captain's ship. The tail tapered off and could have reached all the way to the horizon for all he could tell. It had luminous, whitish yellow scales that undulated between a bright and soft glow, but each scale glowed independently of the others, making it so they dimmed and brightened randomly. Old Captain was mesmerized. Because of the creature's ambient glow, he could see so many other creatures in the ocean, each swimming relatively close and apparently unafraid. He saw tuna, dolphin, octopus, and even a few sharks. They were like underwater moths drawn to light. Wow, you are so beautiful, he said. What are you? Old Captain was not expecting a reply, but he got one. Thank you, I am Eel. What are you? The voice was ethereal and feminine, and seemed to surround him so he could not help but hear every word. Old Captain immediately wished Simon and Miles were there to see this. The thought of his two young friends brought an itch to his eyes. Nice to meet you, Eel. My name is Calidus, but everyone calls me Old Captain. The luminous giant swam closer to the ship. Fish and other denizens of the deep continued to gawk at Eel, drawn by her light, which was both blinding and mesmerizing. Old Captain looked up and could not see the moon any more, only what appeared to be a black circle where it was before. He pointed up. Is that... are you? He found himself at a loss for the right word for a moment. Are you the moon? Do not be alarmed, friend, said Eel, her voice enveloping even the ship and all the individual timbers. Apologies, Old Captain said. I am feeling a tad befuddled. The moon, it's gone? No need for alarm. The moon is there, safe and sound. It is? It is. Then, if you don't mind my asking, Old Captain thought how best to say it, what are you exactly? I am the moonlight, Eel said. Sorry if I frightened you. It's been an awfully long time since I've talked to anyone. What are you doing here, if you don't mind my asking? I came here for a swim. I love the way the water feels. Old Captain nodded and shrugged with a conciliatory smile. Naturally. Would you care to join me, Calidus, Old Captain? Eel asked. He looked around and, remembering that nobody from his crew was on board to notice, decided, why not? I'd be delighted to. Old Captain removed his coat and his boots and jumped in. The water was warm and comfortable, and he was suddenly struck by the sheer size of Eel, now that he was much closer. Her face had a friendly look to it. Her mouth was curved slightly in a smile the way all serpent mouths were. It then occurred to Old Captain that he would have no chance if the creature had any ill intent for him. He was confident that Eel could swallow a great white shark in a single gulp. Pardon me for asking this, he said when he came up for air, but you're not going to eat me, are you? He immediately wished he'd asked the question before jumping in the water. No, Eel said. I don't eat fleshy matter. Again, the voice surrounded him. He could even feel it in his bones. Old Captain cocked his head to the side. Really? Well, what do you eat? Stardust. I guess that makes sense. Considering the absurdity of the situation, Old Captain thought any answer would have made sense. He imagined that Eel ate like a baleen whale does, swimming with mouth open, capturing plankton and all the tiny critters a whale eats. He imagined Eel doing that, but the plankton was bits of stardust floating in the ether of space. Eel's body was so enormous it was hard to comprehend. Old Captain's whole body could fit inside a scale. Yet, despite her size, she moved as gracefully as a silk scarf in a breeze. Eel's eyes were hard to see through the shine of her scales, but Old Captain thought he could see the Milky Way itself in them. The old cavalier felt something then that he'd not felt in many years, a sense of absolute wonder. He could see the familiar patterns of the moon, the whites and grays that made up what looked like a rabbit or a man, but they were just patterns of scales, luminous white, pale yellows, and grays. Let us swim, then, Eel said. I cannot maintain this small size for very long, and I would like to enjoy your company before I must leave. Old Captain swam with Eel and watched him wonder at all the fish and creatures of the deep that gazed at him and the giant moonlit being he accompanied. As they swam, he felt more and more at home in the water, as if he belonged there. He also felt slightly younger. The usual aches and pains of age seemed to abate in the brilliant light of this magnificent creature. The swim was pleasant, and as they went, they talked of the world and its many ages. At one point, they swam by an ancient shipwreck. The ocean floor was nearly done claiming the old galleon for the deep. Such an interesting world you have, Eel said. Indeed. I imagine you've seen a lot in your day. I watched this world grow, Eel said with a hint of wistfulness. I have felt countless eyes from down here. I guess so, old Captain said as he tread water. You've helped guide us, helped us see in the dark, tell time or find our way, or even, for some, to find love. Old Captain felt a little catch in his throat. I suppose you've been asked the meaning of life a lot. Hmm. Everyone from the great lizards to you humans has asked me that question, Eel said. Everything that lives searches for meaning, and they all ask me at one time or another, and the answer is always the same. Eel's voice trailed off, and then there was a silence between them for a few moments. The sound of the ocean was calming, and made it hard to track time. A sudden and unexpected need to know the answer came over old Captain. His throat went dry, and he felt his heart flutter with anticipation. Was he going to hear some ancient wisdom never before heard? Would the answer fill the space inside that he couldn't seem to fill? Could he leave the sadness that he has sometimes in the water in this very moment? After a while, almost nervously, old Captain broke the quiet. What is it then? He asked. What is what? Eel replied. Old Captain spit out a bit of water. The meaning of life. Eel leaned in close to him. Living. Old Captain blinked at the response. He opened his mouth to say something, but could not muster a single word. Eel's answer was a slap of cold water, because in that moment he knew it was true. It was that simple. After a pause, they continued with their swim. Neither saying another word for some time. They swam far. So far, he'd lost sight of his ship, but something told him that it was okay, and he would be fine as long as he stayed close to Eel. Other giants of the deep moved out of the way, and he saw the faces of whales, sharks, and squid alike, all gazing at them with what he assumed was wonder. Later, Eel offered tales of years, centuries, and millennia long gone, while old Captain listened and felt small. As she spoke, he noticed that the stories all sounded similar. Despite their being about animals or humans or even plants, all things seemed to live and love towards some shared end. After a while, they enjoyed each other's company silently. As the sun started to crack the darkness open like an egg, old Captain and Eel had arrived back at his ship. He felt like he'd swam the whole ocean. The old ship groaned and creaked as it always did, and seemed smaller now than when he'd left it. Will I ever see you again? Old Captain asked. He suddenly felt a swell of emotion in his chest as the words left his lips. He was going to miss Eel. You will, Eel said. I want to hear your stories next time. I've got just the one for you. He thought of Simon and Miles again, and missed them terribly. What's it about? Eel perked up, as much as a 200-foot sea serpent can. Tell me a little, so I look forward to it. Old Captain smiled. It's about how a young knight and an even younger wizard saved a doddering old fool, time and time again. I will be back for more, Calidus, old Captain. Thank you for swimming with me. I enjoyed your company. Eel lifted the cavalier up with her giant tail and set him back down on the deck of the Whimsy Wayfarer. Thank you, old Captain said. I will never forget tonight. I will very much look forward to your return. Just look to the sky, and you will see me, Eel said. I will shine a bit brighter now that I've made a new friend. There was a bright light as Eel left the ocean and returned to the moon, swimming through the sky and sea of space. Old Captain felt suddenly exhausted and retired to his quarters. Safe in his bed, he slept for the whole day and into the night, dreaming about moonlight, dinosaurs, and all manner of creatures, earthly or otherwise. When he woke, he felt something he'd not felt in more years than he could recall. Peace. He was at peace with his life. It was a good life, for he was still living it. He wondered then if his sadness would return. and then thought of what Eel said. Living. He smiled at the answer, so simple and yet so true. If the sadness did return, so be it. It was a part of that living. Two faces came to mind for him then, the face of the young knight and the younger wizard. He chuckled. Thoughts of them always brought a smile to his face. Eel of the moon, he whispered to himself. Wait till they hear this one. Old Captain was full of joy, thinking of when he would see Simon and Miles again, and could not wait to tell them the story of the night before. Several weeks later, some time after the next full moon, Old Captain, Simon, and Miles strolled out onto the deck of the Whimsy Wayfarer and looked to the sky. There they saw a strange thing. What's that? Both Simon and Miles asked. Old Captain smiled. The moon had a tail. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the first season of Tell Me an Old Captain Story. I'll be off on some adventures of my own. Old Captain and his friends will return for season 2 in a couple of months.
See you next time on
Tell me an old captain story.